Why do I not know about
Hey, 6:30 is not
well, I remember my high school my grade in my high school.
Well, it's just for the faculty walking out, but your face is just in there, so make sure you don't, you know, pick your nose or anything.
You can switch.
Have your best smile.
Am I in it at all? That's fun. We need to do this over. I got it. You should change. Probably working.
and I'm a rock bottom.
Hey.
Nah, don't say that, 'cause I gotta talk to him.
How are you? Welcome back.
Want one of these? Do you have a yellow back? I was gonna say I would. Oh, I don't know. I just didn't know on the backpack. Draw strength,
Can everybody please take a seat? There's plenty of seats, so no one's standing up in the back. All the staff, take a seat, please. Everybody.
One second, Will.
Yep, we're good.
We're good. I'm about to try to go after this and
I'm DeCiccio, Provost, and I want to welcome you to this year's Convocation, which is the traditional beginning of the academic year. I'll say a few words in a few moments, but at this time, I'd like to invite Dean Ann Hopkins Gross to the podium to acknowledge the new SVC faculty and staff.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome new students and welcome back returning students. It's good to see everybody here, packing these seats. If you look at the back side of the program, you will note all the new SVC faculty and staff beginning their careers or beginning in new positions at the college. At this time, I would ask that all individuals listed on the back please stand so that we can acknowledge you and give you a wonderful welcome and round of applause.
Thank you, Ann. In his remarks to all of you in just a few minutes, Acting President Jim Beckwith will underscore the value of traditions like this one. This morning, I attended another relatively recent tradition at our new Healthcare Education Center in downtown Bennington. At that event, fifth semester nursing students welcomed their third semester peers into the program, led by their chair and their faculty and staff, in a space that Jim Beckwith made possible. Thank you, Jim, and nursing faculty, staff, and students. When I began working at Southern Vermont College in 2008, I started a tradition that is now 5 years old, the giving of gifts. So I thought that in addition to the fact that everyone likes getting a free gift or two, the reason why this would be a worthy tradition to start and maintain is because of what the great Quaker educator Parker Palmer has said about community and abundance. Quote, "Community and its abundance are always there, free gifts of grace that sustain us. The question is whether we will be able to perceive those gifts and receive them." I believe that the faculty, the administration, the staff, the Board of Trustees, and the students at Southern Vermont College create an abundance of talent and goodwill that will sustain our academic community way beyond this year. So I thought it would be a good idea to illustrate that premise today. Inside the backpacks or the sacks that you received as a gift are several more gifts, including, as you'll note, a special round 2 at present that Dr. Stacy Hills, Associate Professor of Business, currently in Utah, prepared for you. So that we may add to these gifts at this time, I would like to ask each of you students here who remember to do so to exchange a gift with a student on your left or your right, in front of you or in back of you. And if you forgot your gift, as a replacement, offer a handshake or compose a wish on the card that's inside your sack. Please. Jesus, you're the lucky one.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Thank you. In exchanging these gifts, you affirm the reality of abundance and obliterate the illusion of scarcity. Now it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the podium Southern Vermont College's acting president, a strong supporter of traditions like the Aims of Education address, and the arbiter of many of the physical enhancements at SVC, Jim Beckwith.
First of all, as Al said, and Ann, I'd like a warm welcome to the faculty, staff, administrators, and students, both new and returning. As always, it's great to see you guys here. We got rid of the rain, so pseudo nice day today. Convocation is the official start of our academic year. It's a tradition at most colleges. We have had our own tradition to the Convocation. Each year, someone delivers a speech at Convocation, a presentation on the aims of education. To set the tone for the coming year, the title of the speech may change, but the purpose of the speech does not. Each year, different speakers offer their perspective on the same topic. Why are we all here? So one of the things I do to get as acting president is to introduce the inspirational speaker who will deliver this address. Today's speaker, Professor Redden, is the consummate professor. His bio is on the program. I won't go through it. It's long. What I will share is a series of words that describe our aims of education. Tom is sincere, he's student-centered, he's scholarly, and above all else, he's a superb role model for everyone in the SVC community. And so, it is with great pride and pleasure I now introduce Mr. Tom Redden, Professor, PhD, yada, yada, yada. It's all yours, Tom.
Thank you, Jim. How's the sound? How are we doing? Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you folks hear in the back? Yeah. Or less, Catherine? As long as you can hear Catherine. Okay. Thank you, Jim, for the kind introduction. I want to welcome you all here today. I want to extend a heartfelt welcome to the new students, and for you to know that at a lot of schools, people talk about their affection toward the institution and that they feel like a family. I've been here 12 years now, and for me, this is a reality. This is not rhetoric. This is who we are, and it is a deep, deep honor for me to be a part of this, this learning community. I'd like to begin by doing a brief exercise. And I think that this exercise embodies much of what I'm trying to convey today. It goes without saying that we live at a time of incredible stress. Is that we are all too busy. Many of us are highly wired. Our computers are on 24 hours. We got iPods in one ear. We have computers going nearby. And what I'd like to do is do a brief meditation. And so if we can all just sit upright, and again, I'll ask you, some of you will think this a little strange, it may be, but if you can indulge me, it's only a couple minutes. When we talk about the goals of education, it seems that one of the goals, a central goal, is how to live our lives. And balance, it seems to me, is a central component of living our lives well. And with the fast pace of life that we have in front of us, all around us, we need to learn, it seems to me, to slow down, to be quiet, to actually not talk, for once in a while, not have an opinion. This is one way to take care of ourselves. So we sit with a straight back, our eyes are open, close it if you want, and we're just going to breathe very gently, naturally. We inhale, exhale, silently count the number 1 to yourself. 1. Inhale, we'll go to 10. 2. 3. Go at your own pace. 4. 5. As we slow our bodies and slow our minds, our emotions slow down. We can sit quietly. We can be relaxed in the world as it is. And in the process of slowing down our minds and our emotions, hopefully our hearts can open up. And one of the goals of education, it seems to me, is to open our hearts to all that is around us in all its complexity and complicatedness. So just for a few more minutes, we'll start at 1 again. 1. 2. 3. And I wonder what would happen if we as a society, if all people around the world took 5 minutes, 10 minutes at their lunch break and sat silently, not thinking, not figuring it out, not worrying. Try to be in this moment, to embrace reality as it is in front of us. It may be something that may be very helpful. It can help us be open to that which is around us. So thank you for indulging me with that little exercise. Now, there's a gesture that one can find throughout East Asia, places like India, Thailand, China, Japan. And in Japanese, we call this gasho. It's bringing 2 hands together. And again, it seems to me that in gasho, we symbolize, we embody what we are trying to do in our lives. On one hand, of course, we have our right hand. And this may represent ourselves. It represents us trying to find ourselves. For folks who are coming to college for the first time, the question is, who am I? Who am I becoming? What is it that I want to try and experiment? What are things that are simply just beyond my desire to do? And so this is our lives, if you will. On the other hand, it seems to me this represents the other people and the world itself, in all of its complexities. And in college, what we're trying to do is learn about ourselves, both the complexities and the subtleties, and we're trying to learn about the world itself. And the challenge is how to integrate the two. And what I'm going to suggest, it's not only the development of the mind that we do very well, it's the development of the heart. One without the other can leave us very empty. To do this requires courage. To go beyond the comfortable. I think all of us who remember the first year, the first day, the first week in college, the most terrifying place in the world was the dining hall. Because we were afraid that we would sit there all by ourselves. And it's not that we can't be alone, it's how others would perceive us. What's the matter with that kid? He must be so weird, no one's going to sit with him. And so from the time you get your food to where you sit down, the question is, oh my God, where am I going to sit? This is a challenge I think that all of us face. To go to the comfortable is easy. The question is to go beyond that. And one of the things that I want to encourage all of us to do is to look for those activities in our lives. When we say we're too busy, to find that balance. It could be a walk in the woods. It could be playing music. It could be walking the dog. It could be yoga, exercise, playing basketball. But the question is, how do we find that center in our lives? The fact that I am able to sit here today evokes a profound gratitude for me. This is a precious, beautiful place on this earth. We live at a time in history with unparalleled physical comfort. The United States of America, in spite of some military adventures around the world, basically we are a country at peace. The question I have is, do we remember the blessings that we have been given? The fact that we are here to do what we want. Many of us come from families where we are first generation. the fact that we have the opportunity to change the trajectory of our lives and therefore the lives of our entire family is a privilege that I think we should never forget. SVC is where it is today because of something that political scientists such as myself study all the time, and that is leadership. There are a lot of leaders in the world. To be a good leader is very, very difficult because you have to have a whole set of skills, both technical and interpersonal. Most of us tend to be on one side or the other, but to be able to span that continuum is really quite extraordinary. 6 years ago, we were just over 300 students. We are over 600 students today. And it's very often that the folks to my right are praising your work, and with good reason. But let us never forget the burden that leadership carries with it. It's more than responsibility. It's the fact that it's 24 hours, 7 days a week. Jim Beckwith has worn more hats here than one can imagine, from math professor, making sure that the finances of this entire institution are stable, so all of us who sit in the front have a job and all of you have a school to go to. He stepped in as athletic director, given his extraordinary own athletic career in the past, and he's obviously stepped in as president. DeCiccio, as provost, has brought the college academically to unprecedented heights. What we are doing, this 4x4 laboratory-based learning, is a stroke of brilliance for me after being here for 12 years, because it speaks to the reality of we want to be hands-on, we want to be theoretical, we want to be in the world, we want to be in the classroom. And the grace and the humility with which he does his work is a great role model for all of us. A president of a distinguished small college, New England, told me a while back, the most difficult job at the college is dean of students. Every problem seems to fall in her lap, and it's one problem after another. And these are often problems of life and death. Ann Hopkins Gross does this work with just remarkable grace and integrity. And the fact that she smiles so much when I see her is just a shock to me, especially when she shares just a couple of the things she's dealing with. And so I want to acknowledge the leadership that we have, that we've really been blessed with, because a lot of institutions cannot boast that. Now, one question many of you may be asking is, what's the deal with that outfit? Now, some of you know that this is a step up for me because I am one of the most boring dressers on the face of the earth. Khakis and a blue shirt at school. And then when I'm not at school, blue jeans and a blue shirt. So this black robe, as these robes here, from a sartorial perspective, is a huge uplift for me. So I am happy, and I have to say that, you know, thank goodness I have 3 women in my lives, my beloved wife and my 2 daughters. And, you know, half the time I walk out the door, they say, Daddy, you can't wear that to school today. And we have a discussion, and of course I just relent because I have no opinion when it comes to clothes. The robes I am wearing are the robes of a Buddhist monk and a Buddhist priest. And I was ordained in the Zen Peacemaker Order, which is a Japanese Zen sect, about 12 years ago. And so this is the robes that, as a priest, that I wear. And so, you know, this is probably the best dressed I'm going to be all year, and after this I'm just not sure what to do. So the word convocation means to convoke. Historically, that has meant to summon, to call a meeting with a purpose. And historically, that's always usually been based in England, the Anglican Church, among others. And the question that we're grappling with today, as Al and Jim have said, is what is the aim of education? Well, I have to tell you that as soon as, I shouldn't say as soon as, but in the last few weeks, I decided it was time for me to really crystallize my thinking. So I went down to Williams College, which has every book that you can possibly imagine. And I literally got out 10 books on the philosophy and the history of education. And after reading through about 3 or 4 of them, I decided that you did not want to hear very much about the history and the philosophy of education. And so I put them aside, and you'll be happy to know I'm not going to even mention them again. But what the literature on education said to me, and so I divided it into 2 very sort of general categories, is that when it comes to education, there is traditional education. Traditional education is how most of us imagine it. You know, when you study sociology, you study about socialization. And the question that all parents have and adults have is how do we educate our children about our society? And this is the socializing process. We teach them about how to speak, how to eat. You know, do you use chopsticks? Do you use your hands? Do you use a knife and fork? When you walk into the house, do you take off your shoes or do you keep your shoes on? We teach them customs, we teach them values, we teach them roles. Traditionally, this is what men did. Traditionally, this is what women did. This is what the elders did. This is what the children did. This makes sense because we're trying to perpetuate ourselves as a group and as a species. Therefore, we want to pass on our way of life. This approach in the small c is what we call conservative. We want to maintain things as they are. This traditional approach is a little bit suspicious, it's not very suspicious, of change that comes too quickly. They believe that change should come organically, slowly, and over time. The good conservative, the good tradition talks about the wisdom of the ages. For thousands of years, marriage meant, parenting meant a man and a woman, 2 men, 2 women. For the good traditional conservative, that's a little bit too different, and they're very, very suspicious of that. Now, in education, what this implies is that this young need to learn the skills of society to maintain the economy, to maintain agriculture, to maintain industry. And needless to say, we need skills because we need to work, we need to make a living, we need to have an economy. Now, an example of this perspective was articulated a few decades back by the Board of Education in Arizona. And it states, and I quote, "It is not the job of the schools to create a new social order. The job is to augment a child's love of country, ideals of the home, appreciation of traditional values, and the final result of the work of the teachers," it goes on, "is expected, is the recognition that our nation is the envy of the civilized world, in the words of Abraham Lincoln, the last best hope of mankind." So that's traditional education. And there's a lot to be said for that approach. Now, let me just read a couple statistics about those who would embrace at least part of this in terms of the connection between education and income. In the United States of America in 2009. If you are not a high school graduate, the average income, your average income would be $20,000. Tough to raise a family on that. High school graduate, $31,000. Still very tough to raise a family on that. Associate's degree, 40, bachelor's, 57. Master's, $74,000 a year. Professional, engineering, doctors, lawyers, $128,000, and doctorates at $100,000. So from a practical point of view, education makes sense. That doctorate statistic is not necessarily. In the great state of Vermont, A little different part of society is the prison population. And the state of Vermont is seen, in fact, statistically, is about the safest state in the United States of America, if you're interested. At the same time, men between the ages of 18 and 25, you may be surprised that 1 out of 10 men, 18 to 25 in the state of Vermont, are either in prison or have been in prison. 1 out of 10. I have good friends, I'm not being funny, who are in prison in Vermont. Here's the statistic I want to pay attention to. Of those men, 18 to 25, 95% of them are high school dropouts. 95% are high school dropouts. 45% of that 95 have learning disabilities. That would suggest very early in life, we attend to children, those at risk, obviously deal with those learning disabilities, number one, so that they can deal with them, and number two, they can graduate from high school. And what I learned a few years ago, that in the state of Vermont, we pay attention. People pay attention, actually, to these types of data and information. In order to get out of prison in Vermont, for any type of felony, you have to get your GED. I'll say that again. In order to get out of prison, to finish your term, in Vermont, you have to get your GED. Good idea. The second approach to education is what we might call the liberation or liberating approach to education. While not denying the value of much of tradition, there's also a recognition that tradition does not always get it right. If it's slavery, apartheid, the oppression, suppression of women, we can make a long list where tradition simply has not worked for everyone, and often for not the majority of people. So the question is, how do we liberate the individual? Writers like Gandhi, W.E.B. Du Bois, the great African-American scholar and activist, Martin Luther King, Paulo Freire of Brazil, Frantz Fanon of Algeria. These are writers who have the exact same message. They come from societies that were either colonized from the outside or basically colonized from the inside by an elite who oppressed the vast majority of people. And very simply, the idea is that even those people who live in harsh conditions, ultimately it's the mind that we need to liberate. Mahatma Gandhi, and I quote, he says, and again, this is a time he's been beaten, imprisoned, and he says, "You can chain me, you can torture me, you can even destroy this body, but you will never imprison my mind." And what that means in this more liberating tradition is the fact that we have to challenge the status quo. When your professor tells you something, it means you politely and yet clearly question that. Who's to say that that's correct? We talk about critical thinking, but I bet $1 that most of you went to a high school where critical thinking was not really the currency of the education, it was conformity. You sit still, you be quiet, and you tell me what I'm telling you is important to know. And those who did it well, did well. This tradition of liberating education is part and parcel of what we can call democratic education. And I love the quote John Dewey, one of the stars of this tradition, on the bench out, marble bench out in front here. He says, education is not a preparation for life. Education is life. And I think that's something that we can take to heart. Now, when we talk about critical thinking, a lot of people get nervous because what it means, it challenges what's at stake. It also means that when we get to the heart of it, is that we are all equal. When you think about the notion of democracy, we are all equal. If you're a religious person, it means that God treats us equal. We stand before God, and that God sees every single one of us as equal. If we're from the United States of America, or Iraq, or South Africa, or China, regardless of where you are equal to everyone else. That the life of an American is exactly equal to the life of someone from Algeria, or someone who is from Botswana, or someone who is from Nicaragua. That's not how we act our politics out. But morally, the question is, are we equal? And critical education would say, yes, indeed, at the most basic level. They would look at the question of the United States today. Up until just yesterday, 50 million Americans had no health insurance. The wealthiest country in the history of the world, the only industrialized country where everyone doesn't have health insurance, the most basic of needs that every family has. If you take those people and you line them up side by side, from this spot to California, side by side, you'd have a line 1, 2, 3, 9 times across the United States of America. Those people had no health insurance. And when Obama had 30 million, take away 5 of those lines. I don't care what you think about Obama. I don't think what you care about the health care law. But what this is, 5 of those lines are disappearing. What does that mean to these families? That's a question. 47 million people are poor today, 15%, 1 out of 6, 22% of American children. The wealthiest country in the history of the world, 1 out of 5 of our kids are poor today. And we're expecting them to do well in school. We're expecting them to succeed. So, critical pedagogy, if you will, critical thinking compels us to ask these questions. We don't have to agree on the answer, but it seems to me we have to ask the question. At SVC, it seems to me we embrace both tradition and a more liberating approach to education. And I think that's a wonderful balance. Let me tell you briefly about some of my experiences. I've taught in a variety of places. I've taught in Japan, I've taught in Switzerland, I've taught in prisons, maximum security, medium, minimum security. I've taught in inner city schools. I've taught in wealthy suburban schools, a variety of universities. And what one sees in these different places is that the aims of education, in fact, is very different. I taught for 1.5 years in Japan in what's called a juku. A juku is an after-school school. So the average Japanese kid today goes to school from about 8:30 to about 3 o'clock. And then that child, 5 to 18, their mother picks them up, or they get on the train, and they go to an after-school school from about 4 o'clock to 7. In one of those classes, they'd sit with me, the gaijin, the foreigner, to study English. But what they would do every single day in the after-school school is to do their homework for the next day, to make sure they were that well prepared for the next day. And so there I'd be sitting with 5 and 7 and 14-year-old boys with their Tokyo Giants and their, Osaka, whatever the team is, I can't remember, their baseball hats on and their backpacks in tow. And they would sit all day nervous because they hadn't been able to play. They would study all day long. The Japanese, the Chinese, Singapore, these various countries, they are way ahead of us in science and math. And you know what? No kidding. Do I want my children to go and live in that system? The answer is no, never. I want my children to have a childhood. So high scores in math and science is not necessarily the kind of society we want. The stress is unbelievable. Suicide is not uncommon in Japan when they don't get into the high schools or colleges of choice. A second place where I taught and also went to school was in Geneva, Switzerland. I spent 2 years doing a graduate program there. And a couple things strike me about that. Number one is that in their schools, K through 12, at the age of 14, you have to decide your profession at 14. You're going to be a doctor or you're going to be a plumber. And if you're going to be a plumber, a carpenter, an electrician, you go to the technical schools. And if you want to be a lawyer or doctor, you go to the professional, you go to university track. And it's not very easy to change after that. When I went to Geneva as a foreigner, I went to 2 years of graduate school there. Everything's in French. My poor wife had to translate my papers from pidgin French into real French. And I went to school there. It cost me about, $175 a year. $175 a year for 10 months of graduate school. Oh, by the way, medical, total health insurance came with that. I had free health care. The investment that the Swiss government, the Swiss people made in education was demonstrated by the fact that basically education is free at the higher level. And a lot of schools in Europe, in fact, they pay you because there's no campuses, there's no dormitories in most European universities. You have to live in the city. But they give you a stipend to make sure that it's available to all folks. Again, you may not think that's a great idea. It's a very different approach. What it means is that there is equality. Now, one of the questions that one might ask is, why on earth am I wearing religious robes at a secular school? And some of you may not know or remember that actually this used to be St. Joseph's College. Right? This used to be a Catholic school 20-something odd years ago. And although there's attrition, this is very secular. This is a non-religious school. And in short, it's because I have a religious faith in education. I'll say it again. I have a religious faith in education. That is how profound, how deep I am convinced of the power of this process. For me, where we stand today is holy ground. This may sound cliche to you, but in my heart, I tell you, this is how I see it. When a student walks in the classroom, to me, it's like the minister in the front of the church. They take everybody. Street people, rich people, it makes no difference. The A student, the C student, the flunking student, to me, they are one and the same. The saint and the sinner, in fact, I am both of those. I'm not much of a saint. I am much more of a sinner. But the fact is, there's no student who walks through the door who hasn't had experiences with which I identify. And I have to tell you, and I've told a few of you this over the years, is that I have the greatest job in the world. I have the greatest job in the world. It's because of these people here. But mostly it's because of you folks out there, the students. The fact that I am able to be a part of your life in an important way to you. I know this is important to you. And therefore, it is important to me that when you walk out of here, I will be a part of your life, and when you leave, you will be a part of my life. What a privilege it is to be able to share that during our lifetime. Education alone is not going to save us. The technical skills that we learn here, the job skills that we learn. In 1932, there was an election in Germany. The National Socialist Party got the most votes in that election. Their leader was this guy named Adolf Hitler. He was appointed the Chancellor of Germany a few months later and turned Germany into Nazi Germany. Germany was among the most educated people on the face of the earth. Education alone is not going to save us. From my experience, this knowledge has got to be coupled with wisdom. It's wisdom about what moves the human heart. It's wisdom about what makes people happy. It's wisdom about what it means to be a human being. You and I are connected at the most fundamental level. One of the traditions in Buddhism is this notion that there is no separation between us and others, and us and the world. For the last 34 years, I have sat, probably literally on this pillow, for between 1 and 2 hours every single morning, 7 days a week, before my children, my wife gets up. And I have sat silently, following my breath, with the intention of emptying the mind and trying to get rid of my thoughts, my prejudices, my opinions. And what ultimately begins to fade, begins to dissolve, is the ego, the sense of me and mine. And one of the things that we need to be very careful in this environment is that as we develop opinions, we should be very careful not to hang on to them too much. And I would argue that it is the nature of clinging to opinions that we have trouble in this world, and in fact that we have wars. If we look at all of the great spiritual traditions, there is one idea on which they all agree. The great scholar Carmen Armstrong has written a variety of books on religion, various religions, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Islam. She says what all the traditions have in common is the golden rule. Do not do unto others as you would like them not do unto you. Put it another way, in the way that it makes more sense to me, is that we need to learn to love each other. We need to learn to love each other. So simple, so cliche, and ever so difficult. Compassion is the notion that we feel we understand people's suffering and that we're willing to do something about it. The Dalai Lama, the great Tibetan religious Buddhist leader, says, you want to make the world happy? You want to make other people happy? Be compassionate toward them. And if you want to be happy, be compassionate. The fact is that we cannot separate our own unhappiness from those around us. And again, I want to strongly suggest, as I did at the very beginning, is to look for those daily practices that can center us, that can ground us, that help us get rid of our own obsession with our own narrative. 24 hours a day, we tell ourselves a story about ourselves. Some days we feel good about ourselves, some days we feel terrible about ourselves. But if we learn to be quiet, we learn to be immersed in an activity, we forget about ourselves. And then we're able to let go of that narrative, at least for a little while. So the last piece I'd like to talk about is the difficulty of trying to see the commonalities when the world is so difficult and so complicated. And I want to suggest that the commonalities are as follows. The fact is, we all want to be happy. We all want to be happy. We want to do well in school. We want to succeed. Except for the rare exception, we love our family. Your parents love their children. Your parents love you more than you can imagine. I often read, I ask students to write autobiographies, and a number of times I read, my mother is my hero. My mother is my best friend. Needless to say. The other thing I want to say, especially for students who are new here, is that it's really easy to judge one another based on what people look like, what music they listen to, how they behave. And again, our tendency is to go with folks with whom we are familiar. It's comfortable, we know it, we know what we like, we think we know what we don't like, or maybe we do know what we don't like. I want to share the fact that regardless of what we look like, I've come to a very clear understanding in my own mind and heart that we really are the same. And the fact is that every one of us We want to be happy, but also we have struggles. We all struggle. Let me just give you 3 examples of students who are no longer here at the college. One student is an inner-city African-American young man. Another is a very blonde, very pretty young woman. Looks like a cheerleader. She looks like, you know, she's LA, whatever they are, dancers or Dallas Cowboy. You know what I'm talking about. And the third person is a old-time Vermont farm girl / woman. If you looked at all 3 of these individuals, they were, as they, you know, they looked normal. They were happy, they're outgoing. I sat down and talked to this young African-American man. We talked about how things are going. He says, well, my best friend was murdered last week. And I dropped him off at his house, and an hour later some crackhead came in, broke through, and murdered him. And the guilt he felt, the unbelievable sadness that this man felt for the fact that he was with his best friend an hour before. The rest of his life he will suffer that. The pretty blonde girl used to sit, I was teaching in the theater, you know, there's 30-odd students, and she was cheery every day. And she really looked like a California cheerleader. She's very pretty, blonde hair, and you would think, man, you know, she's a valley girl, she probably comes from money, she probably, you know, life is easy. We sat down about 3 or 4 weeks into the semester. One of her papers was late. She had trouble with the exam. We sat down. She told me her story. Both her parents were heroin addicts. Her mother had just broken into her brother's computer and stolen every single penny he owned to buy heroin. She lived a nightmare 24 hours a day, and that nightmare was her parents. That's not how it's supposed to be. And the third example, again, on the surface, wonderful, outgoing, cheerful woman. She's going to school full time. She's got 3 kids. Her husband's disabled. She has no money. She slept 3 or 4 hours every day. She had to work, take care of her children, take care of her husband, and do her schoolwork. She's getting B's. Every single day of this woman's life was a struggle beyond anything I've probably known in my life. You take those 3 on the surface, and they are very different. You can jump to all sorts of conclusions about every single one of those persons. The fact is that each one of them struggles, and each one of them wants to succeed, and each one of them was at this college in order to do that. So the very last thing I want to add is that when we talk about things like diversity, the faculty talked about this, but I had this thought for a long time. We talk about tolerance. We talk about being colorblind. To tolerate means you hold your breath and breathe. Colorblind means you close your eyes. It seems to me what we want to do is that we want to celebrate. We want to celebrate that which is different. And I'll say, I've been blessed. The first 5 or 7 years after I finished college, I had never been anywhere. 5 years I lived outside the United States of America, Asia, Europe, and Latin America, traveling to the Middle East, to Africa. And what I learned in that experience is the infinite wealth of cultures around the world that are so different than my own. There are many times I was the only white person in a crowd like this. If it was Asia, Africa, Latin America, often I couldn't speak the language. And the beauty that emanated time and time again was just dumbfounding. If a person is a woman, A person is an Irish Catholic like I grew up. A person is African American from her parents from South Carolina and Alabama. Someone who's from China or Japan. I am not blind to who they are. The fact is that I can't wait to find out about them. Because the fact is that the wealth that they bring, that is a wealth that I don't necessarily know as well, what a gift I have in them. So in closing, let me just return to this notion that sort of the subtitle of the talk today is the notion, the aim of education is no separation. Is that in my heart, I am convinced, and in my own life, I live it every day, is that when I am able to center myself, when I am able to let go of my own story and literally open myself up to others around me, embrace them, be grateful, in fact, I can live truly a blessed life. You've been great, you've been patient, thank you, it's been a privilege.
So okay, there's a quiz, and you can cheat. Look at your program, the front of the program. Do you remember what color Tom says he wears for a shirt? What color is it? There you go. Thank you, Tom, for your presentation, for helping us to remember the gifts we have, to have balance, and that education is the great leveler, and that there is no separation among us. I want to thank everybody who helped with today's convocation, but especially Professor Eric Despard, our music director, facilities, IT, communications, particularly Marion Whiteford for this beautiful program and all that she did to advertise. And of course, Donna and Robin and Colleen in the executive suite for the attention to detail and the great dessert everybody's now going to enjoy once we finish the ceremony. We're not going to process back after I finish with just a few words, but we're going to listen to Eric Despard play in the quiet of the morning. When he's done, we'd like you to stay and enjoy the desserts with us that are in the back of the courtyard. So just before Eric plays, let me conclude the convocation the way I began today, if you read your email, with a few lines from the former poet laureate of the United States, Billy Collins, in his poem Aristotle. This is the beginning. Almost anything can happen. This is where you find the creation of light, a fish wriggling onto land, the first word of Paradise Lost on an empty page. This is the very beginning. Have a happy day.